Welcome everyone to Caller Commentary. We are your pauper commentators, Michael Petchik and Adrian Guarzales. How's it going, Adrian?
Pretty good. I want to tell you something, Mike.
What do you want to tell me?
We have a Patreon. For $1 an episode, you can hear the full show, including the pre- and post-show, as well as gain access to our patron-exclusive Discord channel.
I mean, that seems like a good deal, Adrian. I'm always glad to have our patrons
if you're
on
in
hand.
Lowell, or if you're in Peabody, you too, both fine Massachusetts towns, you too can listen. I mean, anyone really, but especially people from those towns.
Especially everyone from Peabody, Lowell, Worcester, or any of the other Boston towns with names that out-of-towners find uncomfortable. All right. So we've got our Patreon. We're also brought to you in part by Hipsters of the Coast. They are a content hub for Magic the Gathering stuff. They've got all sorts of other articles for different formats. We're the pauper guys, but there's all sorts of other stuff if you are into other options in the Magic world as well. So yeah, go check them out, hipstersofthecoast.com. Follow them on social media. They've got all sorts of articles going up pretty much every day of the week. So go check them out and, enjoy your Magic content.
Let the record show that the Hipsters of the Coast blurb is 2 sentences.
The Hipsters of the Coast blurb is much shorter, but
yet you found a way.
Adrian, it's called improv. You wouldn't understand it.
And yet you found a way.
I did.
Is this what they call comedy?
Despite overwhelming odds not in my favor, I did find a way to make that painfully long. All right, Adrian, what are we talking about tonight?
We're talking about our favorite format in all of Magic the Gathering. I am, of course, referring to the other P format, Peasant.
Yeah, this is the deeply unofficial version of our format.
I think we actually may have had a Peasant episode very, very early on, now that I'm thinking about it.
Did we?
But I don't really remember. We might have. If we did, it was in like the single-digit episodes. It was a long time ago.
Well, we figured with Modern Horizons, for lack of a better way to say it, just on the horizon, there's going to be downshifts or reprints or new cards introduced to the format, and we figured we might as well get ahead of the what do you think is going to be downshifted train in a roundabout way. So we're going to be talking about this weird format local to pretty much Europe. Like there are communities in France, there are communities in Germany, and there's Italian.
And they play online. So if the format tickles your fancy, you can go to mtg-peasant.com and you can see where they are playing their games. But what is Peasant?
What is Peasant? Okay, so Peasant is similar to Pauper. It's a rarity restricted format. And the basic long and short of it is you build a 60 card deck. There are the normal 4 of restriction. You get you build a deck that is at least 60 cards. You have a 15 card sideboard. The only difference is that everything has to be commons, except you can have up to 5 uncommons. And it's similar to Pauper. It uses the lowest printed rarity to determine rarity.
And those 5 uncommons are between sideboard and main deck, so no cheating there. So there are some legal addendum here, but I won't get into it. Really, what we're more interested in is what is banned. Everything that you might think, playing schemes, conspiracies, anti-cards, and other non-authorized Type 1 cards. That's an old school way of saying that.
It is.
Are not allowed. But let's go down the ban list real fast. First of all, we got Bazaar of Baghdad, Berserk.
Is Bazaar of Baghdad just on there because it's really expensive?
I don't know. Actually, I guess Dredge is actually not that good, because if you don't have Serum Powder, for example, you don't have. I mean, you have like some. It's on here because it's just isn't it just better than Tordex?
I mean, it's weird because like I imagine there's enough dredgers. Like you can play Stinkweed Imp, you can play Golgari Brownscale. Like you could get a density going, but I guess you are afforded Dread Return, but you don't have a lot of the payoffs. Like,
Well, I think if you're playing Bazaar, you want like 4 Bazaars anyway, right? So you only have one more uncommon to give.
yeah, and then you don't get Narc amoebas because those are uncommon. So like, I'm not sure if it actually needs to be banned or if it, because for reference, they also have dates next to all these. This looks like it was in the very initial wave of bannings.
Right, January 1st of 2000. There's also Berserk,
Yep.
which is also early, but if you look down, you'll see Invigorate was banned relatively recently, last month. So I imagine there's an infect issue at hand there. Brain Freeze, Cranial Plating, Delver, that's the key one, Demonic Tutor, Empty the Warrens, Force of Will, Frantic Search, Glimmer Post, Grape Shot, Imperial Recruiter, Invigorate, Library of Alexandria, Mana Drain, Peregrine Drake, Skull Clamp, Soul Ring, Strip Mine, Temporal Fissure, so we have all of a post banned, Tendrils of Agony, and Treasure Cruise.
So I do think it's interesting that they opted to ban Glimmer Post because that's not the mana one. Like,
oh, I hadn't thought of that. Cloud Post is not on this list. Cloud Post does get worse, but you're right. It's nowhere nearly as it is much stronger than this one.
Yeah, it's interesting, and it wouldn't surprise me if it's just the fact that
Now,
like it makes it bad enough.
So one other cool thing is that since they are not an official format, they are managed by a committee, and they actually have a couple of documents here that you can reference, but there's no real information on here about why this is banned. But I don't know, just pretty interesting that they rule by committee. So at some point they decided like these cards should be banned.
Yeah, and
in fact, there are announcements here, but they are just in French. Salut à tous et à toutes. I said that wrong. I imagine it says hello, everyone.
I'm very, very sorry to any of our French listeners. But yeah, so I think all of these bans kind of make sense. I mean, there's a couple of odd ones. Like, I'm not sure if Bazaar Baghdad's actually broken, but like banning Skull Clamp seems like a good idea.
Well, for the last 19 years, no one thought to unban it, Mike. So
yeah. So is there anything else that stands out about this ban list to you? I mean, we've got a lot of the usual culprits. Like, I think everything bar one card from the Pauper ban list is present here.
what's the one we're missing?
Cloud of Fairies. Cloud of Fairies.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
And I guess like Glimmer Post versus Cloud Post. But either one of those kind of deflates the mana engine a little bit. Is there anything else that kind of shocks you here? Like, I'm not sure Imperial Recruiter. I guess there's got to be a reason for it, right? Like, that's a fairly recent ban.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, it's hard to know without having played the format. Delver is the one that stands out to me the most because it's so definitive in our format, and I think I remember you saying once that's actually the reason it's banned here.
Yeah, it was pretty dominant because it is a very good card. Interestingly, as we're going to see when we go into some of these decks, is the current like winningest deck from the results that they have on this site is still a mono blue or a blue X tempo deck in a very similar vein. So
we should also differentiate that there is another format called Silver Black, which is commons and uncommons. It's just a no rare, no mythic rare format.
Yeah,
very different.
And I do think that like there is something to that old like restriction breeds creativity. So having to pick 5 cards because there's I have a Peasant Cube. There's a lot of silly things that they've printed out uncommon.
Right. And you'll notice as we go through these lists, this is kind of interesting. There's no Aether Vial in any of the decks I looked at, but like Aether Vial's an uncommon, you know?
Aether Vial,
Wasteland's an uncommon.
Yeah, the Wasteland's an uncommon. Other notables, Strip Mine's banned.
As is Library.
Sylvan Library, though, not banned.
I didn't realize that was an uncommon.
Oh, yeah.
So that's kind of interesting that we have some extremely powerful cards that we're not going to really talk about today a whole big lot. And the list goes on and on and on. There's a ton of uncommons.
Yeah. And it is really interesting to see how how these decks are kind of constructed, because at first glance, we were talking today via text, and what was the first thing you brought up to me while looking through some of these lists?
They look a lot like the Pauper metagame.
Yeah, like the top three here are Fairies, which is the blue X tempo deck, sometimes mono blue, Burn, and a Boros deck. But the interesting thing about these is when you actually start getting into them, there's some sort of there's a little bit of differences. There's less pre-sideboarding, I've noticed. There's a little bit less all in on high power cards, if that makes any sense, from the sort of common side of thing. But let's get into it. So let's start at the top. So there's the Fairies deck. And Adrian, what is this deck trying to do? What does it look like from our format? And what does it actually get from uncommons?
So there's actually a couple of decks here. So the way this site is grouped kind of weird. There is a mono blue version, just like there's a mono blue and a Scred version, just like in our format. The big difference is the blue version, of course, has Cloud of Fairies, Young Pyromancer, which is not, of course. And then it also has Mental Misstep.
Yeah.
Which is interesting. And it looks like Spell Snare. And is that 5 uncommons?
That is. So one Young Pyro, 3 Mental Missteps, and a Spell Snare. That seems... How do you feel about playing with Mental Misstep in a format like this?
Seems good.
But I guess the curious thing is this didn't just devolve into every deck plays 4 Mental Misstep because they're free.
Well, I mean, that's the same in Vintage too, right?
Yeah, like it...
But you're right. You're right. Even this other blue deck doesn't play Mental Misstep. So honestly, Mike, that might be a thing from that particular deck builder. You know, I'm going down a couple of lists. I don't see any other Mental Missteps.
Yeah, it's interesting because, as we mentioned, like you get these 5 slots, and Young Pyro seems really good here. But interestingly, I'm looking through, like, there's a singleton copy of Snap, and there's 2 copies of Gush, and apart from that, like a bunch of like actual mana spells. I guess there's Mental Misstep, which is pretty much free.
And also this deck seems to be pretty on the fringe. If you look at the rest of the decks in this list, they are all actually blue decks. This one is the only blue-red one that I can see.
So do you want to get into one of these mono blue decks?
Yeah, sure.
So
this other one.
Yeah, go ahead.
I was gonna say it's playing Fairy Imposter, which is funny. And it's playing, and this is what I think most of them do. It's playing Favorable Winds, which is an anthem for flying creatures. So they can get away with playing dinky 1-drops like I just had it open.
They've got like Zephyr Sprite in here, which is literally just a 1/1 for 1 with flying.
And Cloud Sprite. And that appears to be the more popular build, is the Favorable Winds one.
One of the other interesting things is in the sideboard of this deck. I assume we're looking at the same one here. The sideboard of this deck is really interesting because it's got Blue Elemental Blast because they use any rarities. They are not bound to Magic Online rarities. Then it's got Flash Flood, which, have you ever seen this card in your life?
I'm not looking at the same deck as you, so no, sorry. I'm trying to pull it up. Which one is it?
It's the first place from Matan. I'm guessing that's how it's pronounced.
I don't see Flash Flood. Go ahead and just tell me what it does.
Flash Flood is 1 blue for destroy target red permanent or return target mountain to its owner's hand. That's a funky little number there. But looking at the sideboard, there's 3 copies of foil, there's Spell Pierce, and then there's Spreading Seas, which I'm assuming is for Tron, which is still very much a deck in this format. It's interesting for me to see Flood in the sideboard and no Gushes anywhere. What do you think's going on there? Why not play one of the most powerful spells in our format when you're still mostly playing commons?
I don't know. Because gushing in a Favorable Wind seems really good.
Yeah, like
and instead they're playing Muddle the Mixture. Like,
I mean, Muddle seems very good.
There's a lot of 2-drops. Yeah, I don't know. Gush seems like it's a slam dunk in this deck. So I guess I just don't know the format well enough to really say why that would be, but I guess on this deck also just doesn't have any cantrips in it.
Oh yeah, I hadn't even noticed that. Like there's 0 ponder, 0 preordain, 0 brainstorm.
It's really more of like a beat down deck that has counter magic.
Yeah. And I do like the fact that in total we're looking at what? We're looking at 17 fairies in the main deck. So Spellstutter
It's trying to build up an air presence and then win with favorable wins.
and it makes Spellstutter Sprite like very legitimately a 2-mana counterspell. And I do think it's kind of cute that it's got Fairy Imposter in there, which is it's a Skyfisher effect, but it's stapled onto a 1-mana 2/1 flyer. That seems pretty solid because then you get to reuse the ETBs on like Fairy Miscreant or Spellstutter Sprite or Cloud of Fairies even.
So there's another one that uses Quickling, which is very similar as well, but costs more, but it has flash.
Yeah, like this is a very interesting take. Yeah, I'm seeing like Pestermite in some of these lists, and a lot of the usual culprits that we'd expect in like a mono blue deck. Here's one that is playing 3 copies of Gush, and that makes a lot of sense to me in a deck like this. But especially because like the curve kind of stops at 2 here. It's interesting to see like this level of diversity. And do you think that that's possibly because there's not as big of a online presence for this format where people kind of get a little bit?
I think so. I think this format probably gets solved a lot slower when new sets come out. None of these cards, for instance, are particularly new. So think of that what you will.
Yeah. I mean, and that kind of shocks me as well because like the power level of uncommons has gone up considerably in my mind since days gone by. All right, so that's mono blue. That's mono blue and blue X versions of this fairies deck. So, do you think that not having Delver is a huge downside here, or did this just kind of adapt to not having it?
It adapted to not having it. Delver doesn't. I think it's fine because these decks are playing way more creatures. Maybe that's why they don't have Gush. They're just playing so many creatures they don't really care about the spells anymore. They're just looking to hit a critical density of flyers and then play favorable wins. So they care more about quantity of flyers over quality of flyers.
Yeah, I mean this deck plays a lot of like 1/1s in the air, and there's definitely ways to punish that in this format. So it's got to be doing something right. All right. So next up, do you want to kind of walk us through a burn list here and point out where things deviate?
Mike, if you're gonna make me walk us through a burn list, I will do it. So, all right, pulled it up. So first off, 3 copies of Monastery Swiftspear. So that automatically makes the deck a lot better. This one is also playing 2 copies of Light Up the Stage as its 2 commons, 2 other uncommons. Light Up the Stage and Swiftspear are both very powerful, and I do kind of like the 3-2 split there. The rest of them are what you'd expect. Well, there are some Keldon Marauders. Those get 2 Lava Runners, and then the normal bevy of burn spells. In the sideboard, we have Guerrilla Tactics, which I'm imagining is because it's a common alliances. I have to read this card. Deals 2 damage to target creature player.
This is OG like sideboard tech.
Oh. So if they make you discard Guerrilla Tactics, it does damage to them. There's 4 of them. There is a mono black hand hate list here somewhere. So the next one we look at has, again, 3 copies of Swiftspear, 2 copies Light Up the Stage. I wonder if I'm going to see the same for the third list.
Light Up the Stage just feels like it's a no-brainer here. I'm seeing one here as well with like Viashino Pyromancer in it.
I see that too. And they have Price of Progress in the sideboard with 4 Monastery Swiftspear's main deck. Price of Progress, I mean, spicy, but not as good without true duels, I feel like.
I still feel like that probably hits some decks pretty hard, though. Because, like, think about how Boros Monarch looks in Pauper. Like, how many basics does that deck realistically play?
Yeah, that's true.
Like, it totally makes sense as a sideboard card. And I think this is one of, not to harp on it, but I think it's interesting with the restriction of the number of uncommons. Using one of your uncommon slots on a sideboard slot seems like a very sort of high variance decision. And it just presents sort of an interesting conundrum for me, because if you only get 5 of these slots, and these are going to be in all likelihood 5 of the best cards in your deck, using one of them on a card that isn't always going to be in your deck is an interesting choice. And I think Price of Progress might be in that realm where it's good enough to like
get you sometimes.
Yeah, like I'm just thinking about like a Tron deck in Pauper, and like those decks often play 0 basics. Like that can really get them. Yeah, but Light Up the Stage seems like a slam dunk, and apart from that, it's mostly what you'd expect, like Searing Blazes, Rift Bolts, Lightning Bolts, Chain Lightning, Skewer the Critics, all these good things. Yeah, so I think that one's pretty straightforward. But the next one is kind of interesting. So we have Boros Monarch and Boros Bully, and Adrian, what's the sweet tech that you get in Peasant for these types of lists?
Gear per Aether Grid, but also Thopter Sword. I've seen in a lot of the decks, and then they also get access to Palace Jailer, which is just a great card. So Gear per Aether Grid, for those of you who don't know, is a 3-mana uncommon from Origins. Tap 2 untapped artifacts you control. Gear per Aether Grid deals 1 damage to target creature or player. So very popular in Modern. And then Thopter Sword is Thopter Foundry, sacrifice a non-token artifact, create a 1/1 blue Thopter artifact, creature token flying, gain a life. You pair it with Sword of the Meek. Whenever a 1/1 enters the battlefield, you return it to the battlefield. So it's an infinite combo.
Yeah, and Gear per Aether Grid seems
infinite.
Yeah, it is. You get to pay X mana
as long as you have
X
mana,
tokens,
yeah.
and also gain X life. So it's kind of like an on-demand creature-based version of Sphinx's Rev ? I don't know. It feels similar in like a more controlling deck to me. So Gear per Aether Grid, that seems kind of silly in a deck like this.
It's spicy. It lets you get more value out of your Ichor Wellsprings, Prophetic Prisms, even your artifact lands.
That was going to be the big one for me. Like if you go artifact land turn 1, like cast a Thraben Inspector, artifact land turn 2, I guess Ichor Wellspring, let's say, artifact land turn 3, you're already at 5 artifacts. So if you cast a Gear per Aether Grid, you have what, like 2 of them untapped just to ping selling. And I do think it's notable, like that's creature or player. And I'm also noticing that in this deck, one of these has like a Krark Clan Shaman, but without flying. Interesting. But yeah, there's no main deck Electrickeries as a result of this, which I think is interesting. And it looks like there's literally a blue splash existing for exactly Thopter Foundry. And that's very interesting. I'm looking at the second list here. It's playing Gaia's Blessing out of the sideboard.
Which was that one again?
1 and a green for sorcery. Target player shuffles up to 3 cards from their graveyard into their library, draw a card, and then whenever it's put into your graveyard from your library, shuffle your graveyard into your library.
I'm sorry, which deck are you looking at? I'm like, not. I
wasn't
able to keep up with you.
It's the second one in the listing, the one from Grenoble.
Okay, sorry, I'm going to it now. Okay, I see. They got the forest, and yes.
So I mean, there are.
I imagine it's to get back combo pieces.
Oh yeah, because you can also just cast this, right? But
right.
that means this deck is looking to grind sometimes, because that is not a quick card. Also noticing that this version of the deck is playing Enlightened Tutor, which seems
right, because you can. Well, this deck's a lot more all in on the combo, right? Like, sure, it has Gear per Aether. I mean, I guess all in relative. It has more artifacts, it seems like to me, and it looks like it's primarily looking to Thopter Sword you out of the game.
So I guess the big thing for me that I'm noticing is a lot of these decks are running like 1 to 3 Monarch cards, and
the card is just so good.
Oh, well, like it makes sense to me, but the curious thing is like we rarely see in white decks that are running Monarch less than like 2 and many times
Do,
up to 4.
do you think these decks just have more powerful things that they can be doing than just playing a 4 mana 2/4?
I mean, I guess kind of. It just seems like, especially in this more combo centric version of the deck where you're running all these one of combo parts, that you'd want more sources of card advantage. It's just kind of interesting to me that that's not where this deck kind of winds up residing. Is
Right.
like slam as many Monarch things in your common slots and then like all the combo pieces that you can. But yeah, like it very much at first blush does kind of look like the Boros decks that we know and love, but it does, yeah, these do some very interesting things. But yeah, it is refreshing to see like sideboard cards in the sideboard. I don't know. I'm very used to like a 1 of or 2 of Electrickery in the main deck, and seeing it back sort of quote unquote where it belongs is nice. Do you want to walk us through some of these Tron lists, since they also don't have access to the post mana base? Tron's still a thing.
Sure. So the first one is just Novatron, but it's also playing Artisan of Kozilek.
Oh, do you want to read that one for folks at home?
When you cast, it's a 9 mana 10/9. When you cast a spell, you return target creature card from your graveyard to the battlefield, and it has Annihilator 2. So that's pretty sweet. You also have, Ghostly Flicker, of course. And then it's playing sweepers in the form of 3 Pyroclasms and 1 Fire Spout. Pyroclasm's a card we've talked about a lot of getting in our format. So what do you make of that here, Mike?
I mean, Pyroclasm does a pretty good job of doing what Tron wants to do. It's not heavy on color mana symbols, and on top of that, it helps blunt early aggression against your deck because you are playing for the late game. And as we saw, like that fairies list, if they don't have a favorable winds down, this just kills every single creature they play. And that's pretty rough. I do think it's interesting to see like Fire Spout as well. What do you make of this? Because this is a weird part of a weird cycle.
It's really good against flyers.
Oh, that's
even if they have 2 favorable winds in play.
Yeah. So Fire Spout, for those who don't know, is 2 in a hybrid red green, and it deals 3 damage to each creature without flying if red was spent to cast it, and it deals 3 damage to each creature with flying if green was spent to cast it, and you do both if both colors were spent. So this is kind of, I guess it's a modal wrath, isn't it? Because
yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that's a funky one. And interestingly enough, outside of the 4 Muldrifters they're playing, none of their stuff dies to that. Either half of that. And that's definitely an interesting one. And I guess looking at the sideboard, like 4 Wretched Gryphs, and then a lot of kind of what we'd expect. Interesting that they're opting for Invoke the Divine as their artifact and enchantment hate. The 3 mana disenchant that gains you 4 life.
Yeah.
Not one I'm used to seeing. But yeah, this one I think is the one that looks the most recognizable in Pauper.
Right. But then we also have 5-color Tron, which is super duper similar, except it has Fiery Cannonade, so again with the sweepers. Still has Artisan of Kozilek, and is playing Fact or Fiction, and has Fireball.
And
Fireball might just be a common though, right?
Fireball does have a common printing in paper. It is not a Mitgo.
Well, that's what they
though.
care about.
Yeah.
And then they also have Meteor Golem, which, as you've pointed out to me in the pre-show, is extremely busted with Ghostly Flicker because it's a 7 mana 3/3. When it enters the battlefield, destroy target non-land permanent and opponent controls.
Well, so what I'm hearing here is 1 Artisan of Kozilek, 1 Fact or Fiction, 1 Meteor Golem, and 1 Fiery Cannonade. That's 4 cards. Where's that 5th uncommon hiding? I've already spotted it, Adrian.
Oh yeah, what is it?
look up at the lands.
Oh, I missed it. I thought it was a Tron land. It's Mazavith.
Whoo.
That's spicy.
Yeah.
Because its deck's also playing crop rotation.
Oh man. Oh, I didn't even see that. Yeah, crop rotation into Mazavith seems very good. Although I don't know what you're sacking out of this, because I guess you can sack anything because you got Pulse of Marasa if you need to get it back.
Right.
So what when you first heard me get excited about Meteor Golem, what was your sort of apprehension about it?
I was just thinking of it as like limited, solid, but not the best. I had forgotten that Ghostly Flicker was a card, of course, and that it's actually extremely good with that.
Yeah. It is interesting. Artisan of Kozilek must just be a big enough beater that like it doesn't matter that that's not an ETB trigger. But man, there's like, what can Artisan of Kozilek get back that doesn't make your opponent incredibly sad? Because like
Itself.
if you get back another Artisan of Kozilek, that's still 20 power on the board.
Yeah.
And Annihilator 4. Jeez, that is just
as
rough.
Annihilator. Oh yeah, combined. I see what you're saying.
Yeah, across the two of them. And I guess that does also make the one of Forbidden Alchemy a little bit better. Interesting to see that this actually, what is that blue card down below? Oh, Power Sync. Okay.
Power Sync. Yeah, just the X counterspell.
X counterspell, where if they can't pay for it, they still tap all their lands.
Could just be Condescend, honestly.
It could be Condescend. And there is one copy here already, so that might be one of those sort of experimental splits.
Cabal Therapy is also a card in this format, right? So
yeah,
theoretically,
I don't know if anyone plays Cabal Therapy. That seems like I guess it is a very good card. It is one of my favorite cards in the entirety of Magic. But yeah, this just kind of looks like a big old upgrade of what I'd expect Tron to look like in our format. So yeah, this is sweet. I don't know. I'd love to play this deck. This seems very silly. Sweet. And then interestingly, sideboard, a lot of enchantment and artifact hate. I guess being in a format where Girper, Aether Grid, and Thopter Sword are possibilities, there is a pretty high incentive for you to be able to deal with those things. Also, I've been noticing as we've been going through these, lots of Nihil spell bombs. And I guess maybe part of that is the fact that a lot of these decks are multicolored and have ways to filter their mana, so they can kind of almost treat it as though the draw card cost is colorless. But just something I'd noticed. Were there any other weird and wacky Tron lists that you encountered here?
I haven't clicked around on a lot more of them, but I think that's a pretty good snapshot.
Yeah, I think these decks probably have the ability to vary up what their X mana win con is if they want one.
Yeah, for sure.
Just because, like, oh, here, I clicked into one that's playing Savage Twister, which is not a win con, but it's X red green, deals X damage to each creature. So, like, that's a very modal wrath. That's whatever you need it to be. So it is interesting to see what changes and what doesn't. How would you feel about old traditional Fireball in Pauper?
I think it'd be fine. I don't think there's a way for you to really get that much mana. I mean, is it really that different from Rolling Thunder?
It's actually worse than Rolling Thunder for the effect. It's 1 red mana instead of 2, but it's still...
It's harder to cast because it's XX, right?
Yeah, no. Fireball is just plain old X.
Okay.
Fireball, though, has the clause that you can split it among 2 targets, or you can split it
multiple targets, but each one costs 1 more.
And it does also split the damage evenly, which is also kind of awkward.
Yeah, you can't choose.
Yeah, like if you have, it's great if you have like 15 1/1s and I guess 30 mana, but it's less good if one of their creatures is big and the rest are small. All right, so those are some of the top decks, and it's interesting to see. So Fairies has to exist because there's no Delver. Burn gets to run creatures because its creature options are better. And the Boros decks get to run, I guess, every like weird artifact combo that they can. And Tron just gets better sweepers and big dumb idiots to play.
Yeah, why not?
I mean, are from a first glance, do you think that these decks indicate that some of the issues that Pauper has at times are perhaps not present in this format, or does this look more unhealthy to you? Where are you kind of falling on that?
It's really, really hard to say. I mean, again, I just don't know the format well enough, I feel like, but it looks like the top collection of decks are very familiar. You know, you have 11 fairies, 10 burn, 8 Boros, and then it starts to sort of fall off from there. So I think that I think they probably have very similar problems.
I mean, yeah, it doesn't look like, it's not like a wide open meta game by any means.
Right.
All right, so now that we've talked about some of the top decks which look familiar, you know, I mentioned at the top of the show there's going to likely be a lot of discussion about potential downshifts. Let's talk about some of the decks that exist here that can't in the current metagame exist within Pauper. And we're not talking about like pushed out because they're slightly suboptimal. We're talking about like strategies that just straight up don't exist. And the first one I want to talk about is this ridiculous thing, Jace's Divining Top.
Yeah, run us through that one real fast.
All right. So, Adrian, you're familiar with Jace's Erasure, the win con for Turbo Fog, right?
Yes.
All right.
I know it so well.
Okay, so this is an enchantment. Whenever you draw a card, target player mills one. This is a deck that has an infinite combo in it, wherein you get 2 Sensei's Divining Tops and just bounce them on and off the top of your library. This is an absolutely ridiculous concept for a combo deck. So for folks who've never, I guess, played Legacy or Commander or a bunch of formats, Sensei's Divining Top is a 1-mana artifact. You can pay 1 to look at the top 3 cards of your library, put them back in any order. Then you can tap it to draw a card and put Sensei's Divining Top on top of its owner's library. So this deck also happens to run 4 copies of Ethereum Sculptor, which make all your artifact spells 1 cheaper, and then 1 very spicy copy of Helm of Awakening that makes all spells 1 mana less. Not your spells, all spells.
Okay.
And so once you have one of these cost reducers in play, you can just have 2 tops and just activate one of them, put it on top of your library, draw a card, and then activate the other one to draw the first top, play that for free, swap it with the one on top of your library, and you can trigger Jace's Erasure an arbitrary number of times in this manner. So, Adrian.
Okay.
What is this deck? Like, does this...
I mean, I think you just described it, right? It's like a control deck.
Is it though?
Combo deck, I mean, combo deck I meant to say.
This is a weird deck. I don't know. This is really weird. We're never getting Sensei's Divining Top, but this is definitely one of the more interesting points in this deck. Also, I will note 4 deserts as a way to sort of blunt the aggro attack. Interesting thing that we don't have access to in Pauper and probably shouldn't, but some paper tournaments allow. So this is kind of one of the more offbeat. I've never seen anything close to this in any format I've been in, but this is neat, for lack of a better word.
Combo players want a combo.
Yeah, and at least this one, like, it does require that you keep casting spells. Like, I guess as long as you have a counter spell, you can hopefully resolve this. But
there's also, sorry, go ahead, keep going.
Oh no, go ahead.
I was gonna say there's also like a blue-green Eternal Witness Cloud of Fairies deck where I guess the goal is to like infinitely flicker them and then mill out your opponent with compulsive research or capsize them because it has like Wild Growth, Utopia Sprawl, and then Eternal Witness is basically like a better mnemonic wall almost.
Yeah, I mean, it gets back anything. It's crazy to me that this deck is splashing an entire color for. Well, is it really splashing at this point? Because like it's 11 cards.
So yeah, they want to infinitely make mana and then buy back stuff with Eternal Witness. That's pretty crazy.
Yeah. It also features a one of pour over the pages.
Read that one.
3 blue, sorcery, draw 3 cards, untap up to 2 lands, then discard a card. That's
Interesting.
I mean, like, I guess this one helps you dig. Like, if you can get into a loop where you're just casting it over and over again. Although, does oh yeah, I guess if you have two lands that tap for 2 or more mana, you do actually go up on mana every time. Yeah, this is not wholly dissimilar to what the Familiars deck was trying to do, although it doesn't have to waste the slots on the Familiars. I mean, this is definitely one that can't exist in Pauper. How would you feel about some sort of Eternal Witness-esque effect coming to Pauper? Like
I think we might already have the best version of that we have.
And that is,
well, it being across different cards, right? You have Gravedigger, and then you have the instant sorcery ones, and then you have Auramancer. I don't think they're ever going to combine on a one card like Eternal Witness.
Did you actually know that Auramancer is part of a cycle?
Gravedigger, Auramancer, and then the other ones.
Cartographer, Anarchist, and Scrivener.
Scrivener, yeah. So, I mean, I don't think they're ever going to combine those into just get whatever you want back.
I mean, I guess we do have Custody Squire, and that might actually be the closest we get to Eternal Witness, but I don't know. I could see some sort of like common more than one type return thing, but I don't think we're getting Eternal Witness, and we actually can't in Modern Horizons. I totally forgot about their weird restrictions on that set. But yeah, this is exactly what I'd expect out of a Flicker combo deck. The other notable thing that I don't know why, but I feel like a lot of people in the Pauper community would like, there's 2 different takes on like a hand / like resource hate deck, because Smallpox is legal, so there's a Smallpox deck,
right? And it's like a mana denial strategy because Sinkhole is legal and such.
Ooh. Yeah, Sinkhole. Hymn to Torok is legal. Now that strikes me as a shocking one, that him is something that's allowable.
Then it must not be as bad as people think it is, because it's not even the most dominant deck here, and it has all the boogeyman cards.
Yeah, although I do have to admit, I do love the fact that this deck that I'm looking at is just straight up playing Dark Ritual into Hypnotic Spectre.
Yeah, I see that too. I thought Hypnotic Spectre was a rare, but it must have been an uncommon at some point.
It was an uncommon in ABU.
Yeah, this is definitely like shades of Necropotence without Necropotence.
Yeah, and like it's not even particularly leaning in on the hand hate part of Smallpox, but there is just straight up a deck that's playing the rack. And the one I just popped open happens to be splashing blue for Trinket Mage to tutor the rack, but
this Smallpox deck isn't even the most popular mono black deck. There's just straight up the Black Devotion deck also.
Yeah.
Which does run him and does run Sinkhole.
Also,
never mind. Those cards are still very good.
Yeah, I think they're still very good. I just think there might be ways to sort of mitigate them enough. The interesting thing about those mono black decks, like Engineered Plague.
Yeah, I saw that. I'm sure that's in there for elves, which is pretty high up there on the list.
Well, I mean, also fairies, right?
Yeah, that's true.
And
yeah, that's true.
A Thopter Sword as well. Engineered Plague actually seems pretty good in a lot of these against a decent chunk of these decks. That's pretty wild that manages to make into the main board. But I guess the thing I want to ask, since we've got reprints coming up, do you think we could see a take on a rack style effect? One of these, if a player has less than X cards in their hand at the beginning of their upkeep, they take some damage.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that we could see something like that. I think it's going to be worse than what we have so far. Maybe it's going to cost more. Maybe the damage will be less. But I think that's pretty. Well, actually, I don't know because these cards are already in Modern. Is there a reason for them to print something else like that?
I guess the thing I was thinking was we've already seen Cabal Therapist, which is Cabal therapy with a body.
But the rack is already legal in Modern.
The rack is already legal in Modern, but I could see them doing some sort of creature-based riff on it. Maybe.
So the reason I don't agree with that is because Cabal Therapist is a creature version of a legacy card. And if that's the tack they're taking, I don't see a reason to do that for Modern cards.
I guess that's true, and 8 rack is not a great deck. I do want to point out that one of these rack decks is playing a card that I believe we pretty thoroughly poo-pooed when it came up for review in Vicious Rumors, the 1 black sorcery, deals 1 damage to each opponent discards a card.
Mike, just because one person in France is playing that card doesn't mean that card is good.
I know. I just wanted to point it out that it's interesting to me that it's found a home somewhere else. Actually, the second deck for this archetype had it as well, and yeah. So I could definitely see them doing some sort of take on a rack effect in the future at some point, and maybe in Modern Horizons, but you do raise some good points. Like the rack does already exist, Shrieking Affliction already exists in Modern. So there are options for that type of effect, but I don't know, maybe just maybe. What other out there archetypes did you spot?
There's a High Tide deck.
Oh yeah, High Tide's legal. Oh, interesting. There's actually 2 High Tide decks.
It looks like there's one with Psychic Puppetry and Dampen Thought and like Peer Through Depths, and basically like an instant arcane version. Pedals an insight type deck. And then there's one here called Ghostly Tide, which uses Ghostly Flicker and Cloud of Fairies for infinite mana, it looks like. Also plays Merchant Scroll so that you can eventually get Capsize. And I guess you just win with Fairy and Augur Bolus beats.
I'm looking and I don't see another win con in this deck. Not even
it
like
also gets to play Chill.
Ooh. I mean, mono red is like the bane of these decks. Actually, it's also playing Rebuild, the 3 mana bounce all artifacts to their owner's hands. Wow, that is a doozy of a hate card for this format.
And Hibernation.
Man.
In the sideboard. Where do you see Rebuild? I don't see that one. Maybe I'm looking at a different deck though.
We're probably looking at different lists here. That's interesting to me that like there's not even like a miser's copy of like Compulsive Research in here. It's kind of shocking to me that because Compulsive Research is just good on its own, and I don't know
infinitely. If you can kill someone with it, all the better.
Yeah, it also does just let you like if you can get infinite mana and don't have. I guess if you have infinite mana, you have everything you need. But yeah, High Tide. Still good in this format. The other one that I spotted was besides High Tide, we've also got Reanimator decks. There's actual honest to goodness Reanimator decks because Reanimate, Animate Dead, I guess Dance of the Dead technically, although that one's worse than both of those, and Necromancy are all legal. So you have the support for it. I guess you could even play on Burial Rites, but I'm looking at one of these lists here, and it uses 4 of its uncommon slots on 2 Reanimate, 2 Animate Deads, and then its 5th uncommon slot on the absolutely back-breaking Pathrazor of Ulamog, which is an 11 mana 9/9 with Annihilator 3, and it can't be blocked except by 3 or more creatures. This is pretty neat. I don't know. I'm not usually the combo guy, but I kind of dig this as a list. Also, it is running Crumbling Vestige for mana fixing alongside the Lotus Petals, which again I do really enjoy, and it runs Manamorphose. And notably, I'm not seeing any ways to tutor for these things. So this is kind of just doing the honest to goodness legacy thing.
Kind of just hoping you'll win.
Yeah. Like, I mean, it sure does work. If you reanimate a 9/9 with Annihilator 3 on it in a turn on turn like 2, you're probably winning that game. I don't know what you can do about that. Also, Slivers is still here, which is interesting. I'm not really sure what Slivers gets in this format. Oh, it gets... Here you go. Here's your Aether Vial deck.
Oh, there you go.
Slivers is an Aether Vial deck in this format. Who'da thunk it? And also, you
only
get
3. What is the uncommon sliver?
the one
Hunter Sliver.
The one I'm looking at has Crystalline and Harmonic. So Crystalline is all slivers have Shroud, which makes you very difficult to interact with, and Harmonic Sliver is all slivers have, when this creature comes into play, destroy target artifact or enchantment. That's not a May, huh?
Harmonic. Yeah, that's what I'm looking at too.
That's
pretty bad if you
you
blow up your own Aether Vial,
right? That's what I'm thinking. Like,
but it's good where it's good. If you have it against, there's only one. If you have it against Affinity, you're just gonna win the game.
Yeah, I imagine that is the case. I'm not seeing like a huge presence of Boggles, which kind of doesn't surprise me because I'm not sure what Boggles would actually get. And they've got like a very, very broad swath of what they refer to as other decks with all sorts of weird things in them, like this green-white mid-range deck with Tetmos High Priest that uses, this is actually cool tech. It's using Flickering Ward. It's an enchantment that bounces itself, an aura. So you can just...
There's a red-green deck here that's just red-green creatures plus 4 Rhythm of the Wild.
I mean, it makes sense. Oh yeah, I'm looking at this. Yeah, Jund Hackblade, Burning Tree Emissary, Naya Hushblade. Oh, this is the red-green deck that we covered ages ago, except with a very good Fires of Yavimaya substitute.
Right.
Man. Yeah, so I mean, that's most of it. Like we definitely don't have enough time to go into like all
of the stuff. Yeah.
It is a really interesting format, and I do every so often go and check out lists just to see if there's any like neat ideas, but it is a very different beast. Like you get a lot more sort of engine cards as we talked about with the Boros decks. Like that deck has like 5 different cards that you could conceivably build a deck around, all just slammed into the same list. But yeah, it's interesting. They do online tournaments. I believe a good amount of them are still hosted on services like Cockatrice, but I'm sure some of them are on MitGo. So if this is a format that appeals to you, I'd go check it out. And maybe you'll find some neat piece of tech in one of these lists that is a common, and you can bring that back to our format and tell us all about it. Yeah, this is a really neat format with a lot of neat ideas in it. And definitely neat to see that the way that they're building decks is a little bit, in my mind, a little bit healthier because it looks like it's a bit broader of a metagame. Not wide open, but there's definitely less
better.
Like there's less pre-sideboarding. And cards kind of live where you'd expect them to. There's not like main deck Electrickeries, which is not the most egregious, but probably not a great sign for format health. Yeah, do you have anything else to say on the format of Peasants that we've given far too little time?
No, I think I'm good. It seems like a sweet format if you're looking for a break from Pauper.
Yeah, definitely. And we're just going to link mtgpeasant.com in the site, in the notes. Normally we link all the decks we talk about. We did kind of blow through like 20 lists very briefly. So I'm just going to link them. It's a neat little website. It's kind of like MTG Goldfish, but a little bit slimmed down. Definitely check them out. And they have forums there. I'll I'll just fill the description with a bunch of resources for this format so that you can go out there and check them out. All right, Adrian, care to take us out of the show?
Sure. Thanks to everyone for joining us today. This podcast by the support of our patrons, especially Samurai Warrior 876. Please consider supporting us if you like the show. You can check below this video or the description of this podcast for details on where to find us. We'd like to remind you that if you listen to this on a platform with reviews, they're always appreciated as they boost our visibility. If you got a deck list tonight for a topic, you can contact us either via our website or you can email us directly at colorcommentary@gmail.com. Special thanks to my LGS Pats Games, Mike's LGS JP Comics, and of course L. You can find our theme song Quantitative and other great tracks over at soundcloud.net/ELLELLELL. Till next week, this is Adrian and Mike, and we are signing off for Color Commentary.